Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Kaszerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to this special edition of IssuesWatch Live. If you have a colleague who couldn't make today's broadcast, we'll be replaying it 3 times. The dates and times are on your screen. If you have any questions at any point during the broadcast, we invite you to submit them in the questions box on your screen. I also encourage you to listen and subscribe to our IssuesWatch podcast, which is hosted by me, yours truly. Every other Tuesday, I provide updates on happenings in Trenton and interview State House insiders, policy experts, and leaders in the business community. Listen in on your favorite podcast app or follow the link on your screen. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into several components of Governor Murphy's proposed budget for New Jersey's next fiscal year. Today I'm joined by Dale Florio of Princeton Public Affairs Group. Dale is considered one of the top lobbyists in New Jersey, and he has worked on behalf of the NJCPA for years. And Richard Keevey is joining us too. Rich is a distinguished executive in residence at the Rutgers School of Planning and Public Policy and a lecturer at Princeton University. Rich brings a unique perspective, having served as New Jersey's budget director and comptroller under 2 different governors, one from each party. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Jeff.
We're coming to you live today from Trenton. We thank Princeton Public Affairs Group for hosting our broadcast today. You may hear some background sounds from the hustle and bustle of Trenton. We are literally only 200 feet from the front door of the State House. So let's get started with a broad overview of the budget. The budget is nearly $41 billion, 5% higher than the current fiscal year budget, and that's a $2 billion increase over the current budget. The budget includes an expansion of the Millionaire's tax to those earning more than $1 million, which is projected to bring in about $500 million. There's a $1.65 increase in the cigarette tax, bringing the total tax per pack to $4.35, which would make it either the highest or one of the highest cigarette taxes in the country. And this is expected to bring in $220 million. There is also a $150 fee per employee for companies with 50 or more employees on Medicaid, and this includes part-timers. This is estimated to raise $180 million. There's also a $1.6 billion surplus built into it. There are no major reforms for public workers' pension or health benefits, something that the business community has been calling for a number of years. How does the process of passing the budget work? Well, it's like this. The governor issues his budget proposal, which he did on February 25th. Then it goes to the legislature for their review and any changes they want to make. Then the legislature finalizes an Appropriations Act and sends it to the governor. The governor has a few options then. He can sign it as is, he can veto it, or he can issue a line item veto where he can cut spending and take things out, but he can't put anything in. And all this has to happen by June 30th to avoid a government shutdown. So we surveyed our members this month about what they think will be the impact of the proposed budget on the state's economy over the long term. 78% said it will get marginally or significantly worse. That's even higher than the 70% who felt the same way after the governor's budget proposal last year. And only 12% said it will get marginally or significantly better. So, now what you're all here for, let's go to the experts here with me today and hear what they have to say. So I mentioned a few of the things that I thought were significant or what you're reading about in the newspapers. What do you think are the most significant items in the budget? So why don't we start with you, Dale?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, it's pension. The governor's making another significant commitment to shore up the pension. I mean, I think it's most most of your viewers know that the New Jersey pension program has been underfunded, and we lead the nation, or I think we might be second or third from the bottom in terms of pension underfunding. The other, I think, big appropriation, the governor, second year in a row, is more money for K through 12. Since the 2008 K through 12 funding formula was designed, certainly through the Christie years, there had been an underfunding of the K through 12 program. So the governor, in his first couple budgets here, has made sure to put more money in it. It's not fully funded, and what we've seen in the last couple days since the announcement are communities that continue to lag in terms of their funding. So that issue is not dead.
Right.
But those are the two big components of the budget and the increase. I mean, we're talking close to $1 billion in new spending. So
for
this year.
Okay. Rich, what do you?
On that same line, of course, the biggest increase in the budget is for school aid. And people should know that 40% of all spending in this state budget is for school aid.
Wow.
60% is for everything else, of course. And of course, there's
municipal aid. How much? Municipal and county aid. How much do they get? From
they're about $1.1 billion.
Okay.
As opposed to the school budget is $16.3 billion. So the comparison's really nice between school funding and local funding.
Right.
And of course, another big initiative is, as suggested by Dale, is the pension funding. So we're running close to 80% of what the ARC is required for the state to put in. So there's a big initiative there, up into the $4 billion range. Should have been approximately $6 billion if we were going to fund everything, but an extensive initiative. And of course, the governor has a significant increase for transit. Lots of problems in the transit world for those people who ride the buses. It's a $132 million increase.
Which
perhaps
is
one of the largest increases. It brings it up to about a $600 million program for New Jersey Transit.
Is that a 30% hike in?
Oh, I didn't do the computations, but it's a big.
Just want to make sure
it's
I'm
a big
not
number.
in outer space with my.
A couple other things. There was a new $50 million program for college students. As you know, there was an initiative the last couple of years for kids in county college.
Right.
Now we want to suggest, the governor is suggesting that we fund perhaps the first 2 years for students below a certain income, and that's what that new $50 million program is proposed.
First 2 years at a
First 2 years
school?
at a four-year school, and the details of which I'm not familiar with yet, and I'm sure it needs legislative approval. I'm sure that's one of the items that the legislature will be looking at as to whether we want to, advance into another new program. And of course, on the revenue side, of course, the big issue, as you suggested, is the expansion of the Millionaire's tax. In total context, the budget looks pretty good.
Right.
We got a pretty good surplus, and that's good. Much higher than the last few years.
Yeah.
So that's good. And the governor would also tout that he had a lot of property tax relief. Perhaps we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Might be a little little expansive statement that he makes. But anyway, property taxes have mellowed over the last few years.
Right. So there's a projected $1 billion surplus for this fiscal year. So how did that happen? Where did that money come from?
Well, compared to the original estimates for the taxes for this year, we've come in over, let's see what my numbers tell me, $948 million more than was estimated in the beginning of the year. Now, we're still estimating because we're not through to June, but assuming that tracks, that's almost $1 billion more than was anticipated when the budget was passed in July.
I'm sorry, did you say which of the three taxes or all three combined?
Income tax was $308 million.
Right.
Sales tax was $164 million. Corp tax, $556 million more than what was anticipated.
Okay.
So that generates the extra availability.
Got it.
Surplus, and that surplus is also projected to be about the same amount at the end of the fiscal 2021 budget as proposed by the governor. And of course, that surplus assumes the passage of the Millionaire's tax and assumes the passage of some of those other taxes that you suggested.
Right. So
that's up for a lot of discussion here.
Right. So if he doesn't get those, then we're down to like a 7.
But I think, Rich, just on the corporate tax, because that's been a big policy issue,
Correct.
right? I mean, some folks are forecasting a slowing down, maybe in this last quarter. Certainly the companies were bolstered by the changes at the federal level, but I think there's some concern that maybe we'll see that, maybe not to a large degree, but certainly a slowing down of the corporate tax. And of course, I think we're supposed to step down in the rate on CBT
Yes.
As we enter the new fiscal year. So,
And in fact, on that point, Dale, the projection for next year's increase for the corp tax is actually down a little bit.
Right.
So
Right.
to your point, we may not hit the estimate this year for one reason or another, but current estimates look pretty good. But next year, for sure, it'll drop
and I
down.
suspect it was going to come up in this conversation anyway, but I
Right.
mean, we're now, as we sit here today, we're dealing with this coronavirus.
You stole the thunder,
So-
Dale.
But you can't,
And I thought I was the only one who thought of that. Okay.
but you can't talk about revenues at the front end of the program without wondering
That's
what
correct.
this is
Yes.
going to mean
Yeah.
in this last quarter and for the first
Yeah.
quarter of
Right,
the new fiscal
right.
year.
Now, of course,
Yeah,
the
we're gonna
filings
get
for,
to that,
yeah,
yeah.
of course, the filings for the income tax, is pretty much
Right.
completed, if you
Yeah.
will. We haven't collected it all yet.
Right.
But
Could be
there's
a
also
problem.
collections for the last half of the fiscal year, to Dale's point. So
Right.
that's and of course, the sales tax slows down because of inactivity. I went to a restaurant at lunchtime, and
Nobody
the lady
there.
told me it's 50% less than
Yeah.
what she normally
Yeah.
would see coming through. So
Yep. Yep.
that's a problem.
So I just have a quick question from one of our members, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to get your opinion. What is the governor's objective in increasing the cigarette tax? Is it a sin tax to pressure more people to quit smoking? I mean, my guess would be no, it's a way to raise money.
I think that would be my guess, too, because it's projected to increase by $215 million.
Yeah.
And so take that out, and that's a little bit of an issue. There's
Yeah.
a couple other issues in there on the revenue side, too, but I don't know.
If they are successful, New Jersey will have the highest state tax in the country. New York City's a little bit higher because in New York State you have the state tax, and then the city also
Right.
puts a city tax on there. But I think in this age of the internet, the cross-border sales and the illegal sales online will, they say 200 million plus. Maybe in the first year they'll certainly see a dramatic increase, but
Right,
people
right,
will migrate to
right.
Pennsylvania, Delaware, and upstate New York, quite frankly,
Yeah.
and online as well.
Yeah, I agree. That has happened in the past, right? As they raised the cigarette
Correct, yeah.
tax or liquor tax. Either
Last time was 2007, 2008, at the end of the Corzine administration, and they saw
right.
the golden goose is being killed. It's just
Yeah.
it's been a slow death.
Right. From a fiscal perspective, what do you like and dislike in the proposed budget? Looking at it as well as it fiscally responsible, not getting into, well, what's the money for or things like that. Is there anything you like?
Well, I mean, forgetting about how they're going to get there with the revenues.
Right.
Listen, governors of both flavors have ignored the pension payments for years.
Right.
Now, we can argue whether or not the pension payments and the pension program and the health benefits program are too rich.
Right.
But the fact is that liability exists. It has an impact on how the agencies rate the state of New Jersey. So whether it's this governor, and in all fairness, Chris Christie also did better than his predecessor with regards to the pension. I like the idea that we're committing money. Now, Rich will talk about how this just really absorbs the discretion in the budget, which hamstrings other programs. But I like the idea that there's a commitment to getting this pension
Right.
back in shape.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And another point that's worth mentioning is that in addition, as part of that surplus, about $745 million is being put in, quote, the rainy day fund.
Right.
And the good part about that is it cannot be used for ongoing operations. The normal surplus is normally
Right.
factored into the subsequent budget, but this has been put aside. It's been generated over the last 2 years. And that's a really good safety valve, particularly for the situation that we might be encountering because of the
Corona.
Corona
The
exercise,
Corona
yeah.
thing.
Another point that I always like to remind folks, other than the pension problems that the state has, and as Dale suggested, it's quite large, and the governor has made great steps moving it forward. We do have a legitimately balanced budget. Unlike many states, we do not use a cash basis budget of account. We use a modified accrual basis, which is the correct standard for state governments. So when the state says, for example, its budget surplus is $1 billion, it is $1 billion.
Right.
Some states don't count the fact that they have bills to be paid.
Oh, no.
And they don't count it that way.
That's
so
cheating.
I would wish the rating agencies would focus on that.
Right.
But they don't. They focus on the bigger problem, legitimately so, on the pension underfunding. But
Okay. The governor's budget includes what he says are $400 million in department cuts and $175 million in cuts to workers' health benefits. And we'll get into this, the Senate President's and Teachers Union announcement about that deal they have. So the $400 million and the $175 million savings, do you think those are real numbers, or are they, I will go to the numbers expert here.
well, let me put it in a little different context.
Okay.
The total decreases, if you will, in the
Right.
state budget, and there's a chart in there that people can look at, is $1 billion.
Okay.
And there's increases of $1.9 billion. So the total net change in the budget is $891 million. And of those decreases, some are for operating purposes. A whole bunch of them are one-time things that were put in the budget this year and are not necessary next year. So they count towards the total decreases. For example, there's a significant decrease in debt service.
Right.
I can't tell from what the material why that is. I assume they're going to refinance some debt, and that's going to bring the debt service down. So you add all them up, and you come up with a pretty large decrease of reductions between this year and next year of over $1 billion. The $400 million that he's talking about, I'm sure, is a couple $100 million in normal operating cuts that you could normally make each year, plus the projected increase that would have occurred if he hadn't taken the health benefits actions. All which is good. Mm-hmm. And my quick look would say, well, they look like they're legitimate.
Right.
And nobody was fiddling around with the numbers there. So that's a legitimate approach, I think.
What you get when the governor delivers the budget, right? You get a pamphlet that says
Right.
budget in brief.
Right.
What we haven't seen yet
Right.
is the budget in detail.
Yeah.
And typically governors, it's a couple weeks before that comes out. I think, if we had that today,
Yeah.
we'd be able to dig into it a little bit more.
Right.
But agencies, I wouldn't say that it's notorious, but all those line items, I don't want to say are all padded, but a lot of times,
Just a lot of them, but not all.
These items, have more money than they fully expect to spend, and then Treasury takes them back, or maybe they just don't, fund them. So there could have been some of that as well in the budgeting, but we won't know until we get that budget in detail.
Okay.
Another interesting point on that same issue. So far this year, the budget suggests that we're going to have $1.2 billion of supplementals over and above what was appropriated on July 1st.
Say that again?
$1.2 billion of supplemental appropriations. Some of them probably haven't happened yet.
Right.
For example, the governor said he's going to pre-fund some of the pension payments in this year, in addition to what he's projecting next year. So the actual increase in the budget is about $891 million when you take the original budget plus the supplemental, which is the legitimate way of looking at it. So there could be some things that are, quote, not funded properly in the current year that may need a supplemental next year, which is not an unusual presentation technique.
Then you have to begin to overlay what is next year.
Correct.
Next year is 2021, and it will be a gubernatorial year. So you have to look at this budget in the context of what are they trying to achieve this year to avoid next year, especially from a revenue standpoint. We're deep in a presidential race right now. Things will pivot very quickly in November to the next gubernatorial race.
Right. And I've always found the governor's race is really the big race in New Jersey. The presidential race is like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But let me just ask a quick question here from one of our members, Mr. Anonymous, and there's two more from Mr. Anonymous.
I get a phone call for them all the time, too.
Will there be any discussions to get the sales tax back to 7%? And let me quickly say what my opinion on that, or what I think is the answer, is no, because the governor hasn't proposed it, and if the governor's not proposing it, then certainly I don't think the legislature would. But that's just my take.
Well, let's talk about why the sales tax. I mean, the sales tax affects everybody, right? The corporate business tax, you know, the cigarette tax. But when you start talking about the sales tax, that's everybody.
Right.
And if you go across the street and you speak to people in the governor's office or in the legislature, deathly afraid of, you know, whether it was the 1/8 or whatever reduction the Christie administration gave, we reduced the sales tax. Everybody likes to go home and campaign, I reduce the sales tax. So to Mr. Anonymous, I just don't see that happening.
Right.
I got a different view. I absolutely agree 100% with Dale's view of that. I believe it should be increased.
You believe it,
It
but
should
do
be
you think
increased.
it's going to happen?
Back to
It's
seven?
not-
Back to seven?
Back to 7%. I mean, that's from a financial perspective and a budget perspective.
You don't think we're
and-
collecting almost 7% most of the time anyway, or
No.
No?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I would say no, but I don't
haven't
know.
seen a fractional penny lately.
But $650 million is a lot to forfeit from a budget, I believe.
You mean that's what it,
That's
we
what
would
it would.
save
That's
that
what
much
we've
more
lost
if-
from it.
Yeah.
Now. And that was lost as part of this whole deal with increasing the gasoline tax. And I think the
Right.
governor proposed it last year. The legislature took it out. The legislature, as Dale suggests, they don't want it back in because it affects everybody in the state.
Right.
But
and-
strictly from a budgetary point of view, if you want to raise revenues, I'd go for that one rather than
Okay.
putting a millionaire's tax in.
Right.
And we could talk more about that, but that's
Right.
just a perspective. That's,
Except if you
but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see. I have one more question from our people here. This was definitely for you, Rich. How can debt service be brought down by refinancing if New Jersey's bond ratings continue to deteriorate? And if that's a long answer,
No,
we'll skip
I'll
it.
make it short.
Okay.
The state is very competitive in issuing debt. Bond rating may be on the lower side, but it's still A minus. It's not a junk bond. And if you have bonds outstanding at 5% and you can refinance them at 1% or 2%,
Right.
which is what is happening these days, the state will do it if there's a call feature in it. And I assume that's the reason what's happening. So
Right.
they will have absolutely no problem selling their debt.
Okay.
It's kind of like refinancing your mortgage, right?
Right.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned the millionaire's tax sort of in passing. Let's listen to what the governor had to say about expanding the millionaire's tax, which he says will be to provide property tax relief. So let's go to the video.
The property tax is the most unfair, regressive, and cruelest of taxes. A middle-class family in Merchantville or Milford or Moonachie, after all, pays a greater percentage of their income in property taxes than a millionaire anywhere else. And it's easy to see how our middle class could feel cheated. Their tax burden is real, and when put side by side with that of the wealthiest in our state, proves to be the exact opposite of fair. It isn't the wealthy who bear the burden of our tax system, it's the middle class. Asking the wealthiest 22,000 New Jerseyans to pay 2 cents more in income tax for every dollar they make over $1 million, so we can provide nearly $500 million more in property tax relief to New Jersey's families is simple fairness.
So, gentlemen, is it safe to assume that the millionaire's tax is once again going to be probably the most contentious issue in the budget negotiations?
So I don't know. Is it March or April? Yeah, it is. So yes. You know, after a while, well, let me say that I think the atmosphere is a tad different this year. The Senate president surprised people. I think it's fair to say that he didn't totally dismiss it. In fact, there was a stronger level of dismissal from the speaker
Yeah.
on it.
Reverse.
But the Senate president did put a proposal out there. I'm going to let Rich opine as to how reasonable, how that, if that objective of putting $1 billion of additional money into pension
Right.
pot
Right.
is doable. But the Senate president did counter with an idea. So it hovers out there, which is different than the debate we've had the last
Right.
previous 2
Where
years.
Senate President
Sure.
just said no.
So,
So the pension appropriation has been increased by $1 billion if you assume the supplemental will pass this year.
Right.
And what Sweetie is saying is I want another $1 billion in there.
Right.
And it's absolutely impossible, in my opinion, to that happen.
because
Because we don't have an extra $1 billion sitting around to put it in.
okay.
So I don't.
Okay.
I can't get in the senator's head. I don't know
Right.
exactly what the dynamics was.
right.
But I think he's saying it's not going to happen, and therefore you ought to consider what I've already proposed in my
Your commission,
not my commission.
the work, fiscal policy
Yeah.
and economic.
Yeah, what was it called? Help me out.
Path to
Path to progress. Yeah.
Report.
Now, in that
Right.
report, of course, Senator Sweeney wanted to make a lot of changes in the
Right.
pension system.
Right.
So he's saying, in addition to the $1 billion, put another $1 billion.
Right.
And if you do that, then I'll support the millionaire's tax.
Right.
I mean, it's counterintuitive.
Right.
So whether it's realistic or not, I think it demonstrates to people on the outside, the casual observer, that there's at least conversations going on,
Correct.
and
Right.
there's an interest in fixing a problem. I mean, the pension issue is a problem, and fully funding
Yeah.
it. Now, whether it's attainable, and Rich has given his opinion, at least there's been a counter offer to, if we're going to do a millionaire's tax and run the risk of the problems that come with raising the millionaire's tax, we should at least make sure we're doing it for a good reason.
Right. Right.
Back on that point. So what's the millionaire's tax going to bring in extra next year?
Well,
$494 million.
Right.
And that part of that money is supporting the increase in the $1 billion of the current
Right,
increase.
okay.
And now we're talking about another
Yeah.
$1 billion.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
You get it?
So,
Not
yeah,
possible.
Not practical or possible. So let me just run down a few figures that we got from a poll of our members regarding the millionaire's tax. So expanding the tax, 76% either somewhat or strongly oppose it. Only 19% support it. As a follow-up question, we asked whether the governor's proposal to dedicate the additional revenue to property tax relief would change their level of support for the millionaire's tax. 16% that it said that it would, and 22% that said that it would decrease their level of support. So is this the impression, do you have the impression that this is pretty much what other members in the business community are feeling about this millionaire's
Well, let me
tax?
just jump in quick.
Sure.
Maybe. All money from the income tax,
Goes
by
to property,
constitutional amendment, must go for property
Right.
tax relief. So that's sort of like a non sequitur. It's going
Yeah.
to happen if it increases.
Right.
However, a large part of the property tax relief goes to pensions.
Right, okay.
So, it depends
Yeah.
how you want to
Yeah.
phrase the question or the problem.
Right,
you know.
right.
And I would think part of the answer, as part of the task force that Senator Sweeney put together, is I'm not against an increase in the millionaire's tax, but you got to fix the pension system at the same time.
Right.
So he, I believe, puts those two together. I don't know whether Dale has a different view than what I just said.
No, absolutely. I mean, the Senate president's identified a few problems, as has the governor, and they just have different approaches to it. Listen, the Senate president's taken a lot of negative feedback from the public employee
Yeah.
unions, and because of pension issues. So, this is somewhat of an olive branch that, listen, I hear you, and we need to fix this.
Okay, one other thing about that poll we took, we sort of touched this, but when you add to the question that we asked our members, well, what if the money is dedicated to the pension fund? Only 15% said it would increase their level of support, and 35% said it would decrease their level of support. And I'm guessing that's because they think, without thinking it through, they think teachers and state workers already get too much, or their pensions are too big. So they probably didn't have your understanding of what it all, where it comes
Perhaps.
from, and so on.
Yeah.
I would just throw out a more cynical view that
More cynical than that. Okay.
no, that your respondents might have, and that's they just don't believe it'll happen. I mean, they don't. They probably think that we'd raise that money and it would not be used for that purpose, right? Government is notorious for saying we're going to raise the money for this, and somehow it just doesn't
go
happen.
where it's supposed
so
to go.
I'm betting some of those numbers there are a bunch of cynics.
Yeah,
and you know what? They're entitled
They're right,
to
very
feel that
often,
way in
yeah.
many respects.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I got to jump in on that comment. I believe truly that the constitutional amendment says the income tax has to go for that.
Yes.
That is where it goes.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that folks understand
That's
that
correct.
and
No,
believe
that's
that. So
correct.
I
Yeah.
agree with you
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a lockbox.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to
Right.
quite pull all these things together if you're
Right.
not familiar with
Yes,
the state finances.
yes.
What does dedication mean? Do they really put it there?
Right.
Do they put it
How
there?
does it? Yeah. As I always say, running government is a lot more complicated than running for office. Much more complicated than just the average person thinks. So let's look at property taxes. Governor had a pretty strong statement about how he's dealing with it. He claims that he's responsible for slowing the rate of property tax hikes. And here's a clip from his budget address.
No other administration has done so much in its first 2 years to control property taxes or to deliver more property tax relief. In just our first 2 years of working together, we have achieved the first and fourth lowest year-over-year increases in property taxes on record. And statewide property values have grown more in our first 2 years than at any point since the Great Recession. We're helping families by protecting the single most important investment most of them will ever make, and that is their home. This hasn't happened by accident. It's happening because we're making critical investments in property tax relief for our communities, investments in our schools, investments to alleviate the other forces that drive up property taxes, investments that are making our communities stronger and fairer. And we're being honest with taxpayers. We're not going to defeat the decades-old, if not century-old problem of property taxes with gimmicks or in one fell swoop. But we are making real progress, and we are moving in the right direction. This administration's approach, again undertaken with your partnership, has been to combat directly and consistently the costs that drive property taxes higher in the first place.
So, Dale, Rich, is the governor responsible for slowing the rate of property tax increases, as he just said in that clip we saw? Let's go to the finance expert first.
Oh boy. I hate to be a speaker of, but no. I would say the answer is no. The increase in property tax the last 2 years, as the governor suggested, has been 2%.
Right.
That's good. That's what it's been for the past few years.
Okay.
6 or 7 years ago, the property taxes were increasing at about 5.5%, 6%. Because of laws passed by the legislature and Governor Christie, we had the 2% cap and the 2% arbitration. That's what brought down the spending growth.
Right.
And in fact, in the last couple of years of the Christie administration, we were down to 1.8, 1.9, and the governor has continued with that overall decrease in the need for property taxes.
Right,
But
right.
it was external,
Right.
I would say, to that.
So external in the sense that it was prior policies?
Correct.
Okay.
I can't help but say it's like listening.
hey.
It's like listening to President Trump and Obama. Trump says he decreased the unemployment rate.
Right.
Well, that unemployment rate went from 4.5 to 3.5, where President Obama decreased it from
Right.
10 to 4.7.
Right.
So it all depends how you look at it and where it happened.
Right.
Property taxes are down growth-wise.
And this is where the school aid comes into play
Right.
here. right? So the governor gets credit for increasing school aid, which helps keep that pressure locally, right, from having to bump up. Now, their districts are limited as to what they can do.
Correct.
And one of the suggestions by the legislature has been to allow districts to go beyond the 2%
Right.
cap individually. Now, that hasn't happened yet. The governor's actually said no to it. But at least he's attempted to put more money into the K through 12 fund.
Correct.
Although, again, the distribution continues to be an issue for a lot of suburban schools.
Right. Right.
Just another point on property taxes. You know, the property tax, which is about $30 billion, is more than the sum of the income tax, the sales tax, and the corp tax.
Right.
And people should also understand that most spending in this state is at the local level,
yep.
not the state, because
Right.
all the income tax goes back to the
Right.
locals. It's like 73 at the local level, 23 by the
Right,
state,
right.
27
There's
by
a
the state.
great report by Garden State Initiative, the think tank, and they have a whole report dedicated just to that issue, like how much is spent on a local level, county level, state level. And I've always found most people are not aware that the bulk of spending is at the local level.
And mostly with the schools.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's usually roughly a third, two-thirds.
Yep.
Two-thirds
Right,
being the
right.
schools. Yep.
So let's move on to pension and health benefits for public workers. We've already touched on this. And I know we spoke about some of this before we started this episode today. On March 9th, 2 days ago, the Senate President and the New Jersey Education Association announced that they have come to an agreement that they say will save New Jersey and teachers $1.1 billion. However, before we get to that interesting development, let's just take a look at some of the basics that are in the governor's budget for pension and health benefits. New Jersey has an unfunded pension and health benefit liability somewhere between 150 and 200 billion. We know the governor's budget proposal calls for 4.6 billion for pension payments. Do either of you know, and Rich, I think you probably will, how much is slated for health benefits in the governor's proposal?
I think it's 2.7 billion.
2.7 billion.
And unlike the pension systems, the health benefit systems is pay-as-you-go funding. So there's no money put aside for future health benefit payments. And that's why you suggested that the unfunded liability was 98 billion for pensions, roughly correct.
Right.
Same thing if you did it on actuarial basis, then that liability for health benefits is $98 billion.
Okay.
So those
Okay.
two together are the
About 200
or the
billion.
long-term problems facing the state.
Okay, so we're looking at, if you combine the benefits and the pension payments in the budget, we're talking like what, 22% of the
I
budget?
did a quick calculation, 19%.
Okay,
When you count pensions and health benefit appropriations for this
Right.
next year
Right.
compared to the total budget.
okay, so that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, let me ask you a question that I haven't gotten an answer, at least one that I understand. And that is, okay, so the governor's plan is to move up the pension payments so that by 2023 we get to the number that's recommended or called for by the actuaries, which is $6.1 billion. What happens after that? Does the state have to keep paying that much every
Sure.
year?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what is so phenomenal about getting to that number? if
Well, you
we're
can't
just-
you can't get to the long numbers if you can't get to the short numbers. So you got to get up to 6.1 billion
Right.
roughly per the actuaries, and that'll continue.
And my political cynicism comes into play that the governor wants to continue to demonstrate a commitment to this for the unions. I mean,
Right.
it's there's no secret. I mean, the public unions, the NJEA, the teachers union, have been very supportive of the governor in his election.
Right.
And he wants them there lockstep in his reelection. That's politics. That's how
Right.
it works. I think the goal of taking care of our unfunded liability is important to the state for the reasons we've been talking about. But there's also that political aspect of
Right,
it.
right. So I think you guys have answered my question, which is after we reach this magic number in the year 2023, problem doesn't go away. We're stuck with the same
You got to
problem
continue to
forever.
fund it
Yeah.
if you want to become, quote, 100% funded. And
Right.
that's why in the Path to Progress report, the concept behind it was we can't continue to fund all that with all the other demands,
Right,
and therefore we
right.
need to change the pension in the long run.
Right, right. We need to get rid of that structural, reoccurring pension payment we're going to have to make.
Or we need to change the benefits that
causes,
the employee is going to get in the future.
Right.
Not the current employee,
Right, right.
and not the one who's retired, per the Sweeney report, but for new
Right,
people.
right. Okay. So, as we touched on, the Senate President and the Teachers Union, the New Jersey Education Association, announced that they have come to an agreement to change the health benefits program, and it would save the state or local governments, as you were, local school districts, $600 million or so, and save the teachers themselves $450 million or so. So can you give us a brief outline of what that agreement is? And I know most of the details haven't been released yet. How would you, Rich?
And I don't know the details of it either. But whatever agreement they have reached is going to require the school districts to negotiate with their individual unions within each district, and theoretically each district's going to have to agree to do this, because now teachers can get their health benefits not only through the state system, but also through other systems too.
Right.
And it costs them a lot of money to do it. And what Sweeney has proposed was the new structure that we're going to propose, and I don't know the details of it, is going to be such that you will save money. Instead of paying X amount per year, you're only going to have to pay X minus. And the amount that the school district has to pay is going to be less.
Right.
And that's going to aggregate to the $1 billion.
Okay.
But I can't give you the details of it because I haven't seen it yet. But,
Right.
but one point needs to be made. It does not help the state budget. This is all the local situation, school districts.
Which
And the teachers agreed to this
saves
because
them
they're
money.
going to save money, and they're basically going to get the same plan,
Right.
or same benefit. Yeah.
Is that your take? Are there any political things to this we should know about, other than this is an example of the olive branch?
Well, listen, I think that Steve Sweeney's never been afraid of a fight, and so his ongoing back and forth with the teachers union, I think, is a function of, obviously that can wear down.
Right.
But it's also, good government. He was actually the person under the Christie administration that pushed for a new way to price pharmaceutical benefits, to the pharmacy program. He through legislation instituted what they call a reverse auction to get the PBMs, the entities that provide prescription medicines, to actually bid openly with themselves to see who would provide the best price. And that was instituted under the Christie administration, has continued with this administration, and that will continue to show savings because the employees will get the better prices through the PBM. So this is something he's been interested in, and I think this announcement is hopefully puts this on a path to progress.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And very controversial.
Right.
Right.
And the speaker, who's also a co-equal in this, the speaker's had his own conversations with the NJCPA and put out what appeared to be a complimentary statement after the Senate President. So it looks like we're getting close to something.
And I assume the governor, there's no reason why he wouldn't favor this.
No, I think the governor's going down the same line too. He's been negotiating with the unions and reducing the contribution that the state, reducing the increase.
Right.
And this is along the same line.
Yeah. So everybody
good
may
for
be
both
happy here.
Yep, I think
feel
so.
like that's unusual.
Yeah.
So let's move on to tax incentives, and there has been an ongoing controversy over the state's corporate tax incentive programs that expired last June. And here's what the governor had to say about that.
As I've said countless times, Most companies, overwhelmingly, are good corporate citizens who play by the rules, but some are not. We are seeing progress in the name of our taxpayers in getting back some of the millions of dollars we now know were inappropriately awarded, the first $11 million of some $500 million being investigated. I am committed to not reliving the past mistakes, the mistakes that put huge tax breaks for the well-connected before tax breaks for the middle class. And let's be perfectly clear. Billions given away in open-ended corporate tax breaks will be billions we will not have to make our state more affordable for both residents and business. Tax incentives cannot be about rewarding special interests. They must be about making our state more competitive, creating jobs, and growing the next wave of great New Jersey-based companies, period. I am pro-jobs, I am pro-growth, and I'm pro-accountability. That is why I am for reforming a failed incentive system, just as I am for reforming our ethics laws to let more light shine in. When we reject transparency in any form, bad deals are made and taxpayers are hurt.
So what are the sticking points regarding tax incentives between the governor and the legislature? Dale?
Well, I mean, the big one is to cap or not to cap. The governor wants to see a cap on the overall program for tax credits. And the Senate president has moved a tad by saying, well, maybe we should have a cap on individual products projects. I understand that staffs from both sides are really focused on this.
Right.
I think they both realize there's clearly an incentive, right, to want to have New Jersey continue to compete.
Right.
So I don't think this is not going to not happen.
Okay.
Right. So I think there was some hope on the optimistic side that it would have occurred before the budget break that's coming up April 1st. But there seems to be a lot of optimism that maybe by July 1st, concurrent with the budget, that they can have something in place.
Okay, well, you just answered my next question, which was, do you think it can happen by July 1st? So,
well, it's rare. It's rare in politics, at least in Trenton, where folks from both sides are incentivized to get something accomplished.
Right.
And I think in this particular issue, they are.
Right.
We could flip a coin as to where it's going to end up. But there's clearly an interest by both parties.
Okay. Let's move. Did you want to say something, Rich?
Yes, I just looked at a report from the University of North Carolina. They looked at 37 states, and their headline was, "Corporate tax incentives do more harm than good." This is out of my league of expertise, so I don't know how it all works and whether it's beneficial or not. But I think you have to be very clear as to who gets the benefit and what the benefit's going to be and what the inducement is. It has to be very carefully done, I think.
Yeah.
As opposed to, randomly giving everybody
Yeah,
a
and I
tax
think
incentive.
Well, listen, the governor's review of the program when he first came in pointed out some what might appear to be abuses, right? And the Senate president's responded, hey, we can fix those.
Yeah.
Let's fix them.
I think everybody's agreed, and the legislature and the governor, that they have to be. There has to be more oversight. They have to be stricter. So let's move on to something that I found very interesting. I'm sure other people did too, and that is the Senate President Sweeney's recent proposal, for a constitutional ballot question to raise the tax rate on corporations by 1%, and then dedicating this money to New Jersey Transit. Any thoughts on where that's going to go?
I think certainly the senator has the ability to get it through his house. I've watched over the years where legislatures and governors, although this is a legislative, program, if you will, to amend the Constitution, they take amending the Constitution pretty seriously. I'm not sure. Thoughtful, addressing a problem. I'm not sure it's there yet.
Yeah, yeah. Any thoughts, Rich?
Just a macro thought. I don't like dedication of revenues, and I think the proposal is $500 million for the voters,
Right.
of which 300 would come from the corp tax, some money from the New Jersey Turnpike, and
Yeah,
some money from the
diversions,
energy
right, yeah.
program, and we dedicate it all. Obviously, we need more money for transportation, and how we get to it, it's okay with me. But I
Right.
wouldn't want to have it dedicated
Right.
because transportation is a problem today. 5 years from now, it could be Medicaid. So we need to not freeze up control the money.
I mean, people complain about the gas tax, or, anytime you want to talk about raising it, but in a sober moment, people say, well, you know what? Bridges, roads,
Yep.
I use them.
Right.
Okay, that's good.
We
Yep.
need 'em.
This is, I mean, you can argue, okay, the corporate business tax, there are a lot of corporate employees that commute one way or the other in New Jersey, but it's not a broad-based, everybody drives the roads, so the
Yeah.
gas tax applies to everybody.
Yeah.
This might be a harder sell.
Yeah, I think that's a good
Right.
comparison.
Okay.
Yeah.
The business community and taxpayer groups believe in general that the governor is unfairly targeting businesses in higher income New Jerseyans. He repeatedly says that they are not paying their fair share, that's his term, fair share of taxes, and that the middle class are getting a raw deal. Is this true? Any truth to that? That they are not paying their fair share?
I thought you were going to ask if they're not wrong that the governor is doing this. I think, listen, the governor has a philosophy, and I think he's staying true to his philosophy. I mean, if you understand, the more progressive wing of his party, what he's proposed is consistent with that.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a problem with somebody who stays consistent with their philosophy.
Right.
Now, whether it's fair in New Jersey or right for New Jersey, I would beg to differ. I think the state's very, very much of a center-left, slightly left state. It's a moderate state, and it costs a lot of money to live here. And I think everybody, I don't care if you're making $1 million or if you're making $70,000, you feel like you're working your backside off, and then for somebody to come in and tell me you're not paying your fair share is
Right.
a problem.
Yeah.
Folks
Yeah.
don't like it.
Yeah, and we really don't ever get a clear picture as to what the middle class means when he's
It's kind of like
talking
trying to
about-
say, well, what's Central Jersey, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know, right?
Yeah.
We really don't know where Central
Yeah.
Jersey is, and you're right. Where is the middle class? Who is it?
Yeah. So, did you have something?
No, I would just put it within the global context of it. You need to address some of the existing problems before we raise the taxes, and then pensions the big one. We ought to fix
Right,
that,
yeah.
and if we need more money, that's one option.
Yeah.
Also, the option of bringing the sales tax back up. That's another way. So we're not going to get rid of taxes in the state. It's a matter of who's going to pay it, and the governor has a perspective, which I'm more on that side than the other side.
There's something wrong if New Jersey now is if we have to pay the highest income taxes in the country. There's something wrong to be the first in any of those types of things. So to Rich's point, we need to look internally as to other things as to why that's the case.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
why the drain? Why the need for revenue to do things?
Yeah, as a lot of our members say, we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem.
Although when you get into the details, people are very stressed to exactly define what it is they want to get rid
Yeah,
of.
as long as it doesn't hurt them.
Right.
So, Dale, I just want to ask you, and you by all means jump in, a few questions related to politics and elections.
I thought we've been talking about that.
Yeah, well, okay.
Sure.
Let's make it like
Okay.
a more focused, strictly political and electoral questions. What are the governor's poll numbers now? Are they good? Are they bad? And do you think the tax hikes that he has done, have they hurt him at all? Looking from a polling perspective?
I think you'll be shocked at this. I really don't. When I get the Monmouth poll, I'll look at it, or the FDU poll. I really don't pay attention. I mean, polls used to be a big thing 20, 25 years ago, because you could actually reach people. Now you can't reach people, so the samples and the sizes are just kind of
Yeah,
mixed.
I don't.
But if you look at the Monmouth poll, which seems to have a lot of credibility, and I think the FDU poll has been in the same area, the governor's hovered around the very low 40s. and
Wow.
he's just kind of been
Favorables.
there. Right, and he's just been there, right? Christie had some highs and lows
Yeah.
when he was riding high, but Governor Murphy has now consistently been in the low 40s. I think a lot of it is, and in those same numbers, a lot of respondents will say, "Well, I don't really know enough about him to say how I feel."
Okay.
And I think that's a function of just the age that we're in. You've got the Washington backdrop of Donald Trump taking a lot of air out of the room
Yeah.
in terms of policy, and I think it's hard for a governor at any level to kind of break through that, especially in the metropolitan area where you're competing with a Mario Cuomo and Governor Wolf over in Pennsylvania. So the fact that a lot of folks still don't have an opinion of him, in some respects it might be maybe he's lucky. But that'll all change once November comes along and we're now into a re-election.
Then people will know who
People
he
will
is.
know who he is, and then they'll judge him on what he's done up to this point.
So we're talking, if I understood you right, like 40% favorables,
Right.
and
And then it's- then there's a-
30% who don't even know who he is. And
I'm not sure it's that big,
Right.
and but his identity numbers are low.
Okay.
Right. He's doing very well in the communities that he's tried to reach, right? The progressive communities. He's spent a lot of time there. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a self-proclaimed progressive, and he's worked hard to
yeah, there's no doubt
to
about
push
that.
that agenda.
So here's another electoral question, I'll call it. So we're going to get through the presidential election, in the fall, and then the big race comes, the governor's race.
The big race.
So trench warfare. So if we look at where things stand now, the governor's popularity and so on, if you had to make a bet right now, or I won't make you bet, if the Republicans, let's say, had a strong gubernatorial candidate and the election were tomorrow, who do you think would win, the Republican or Murphy?
I think Governor Murphy would win.
Okay.
I think you're aware of this factoid, and I'm not going to get it entirely right, but I think in the last 40 years, only twice, and I know Bush and Christie Whitman was one of them,
Right.
but only in the last 40 years has the party that owns the White House or has the White House been opposite. I'm sorry. Usually, the party that's controlling the White
Right.
House.
The opposite
It's
party.
the opposite
wins in
party
New Jersey.
is in New Jersey. So, if Donald Trump wins, okay, the Republicans, at least historically, it would not be good for them. If Trump loses, history would say that that's better for the Republicans in New Jersey. And I think again, George Bush and Christie Whitman were the same party. And I forget the other one, but I think it's only twice in the last 40 years where
That's interesting.
it's been the same party.
That's interesting.
What a conundrum that one was there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I mangled it a little bit.
No.
But I get the point, and I also assume that part of that is also just that Democrats, it's sort of a Democratic state in a lot of areas.
The registration difference is approaching 1 million.
Wow.
But I think
I didn't know that.
I think the differential. But Maryland and Massachusetts elect
Yeah.
Republican governors.
Yeah.
So did we.
The other factoid is that not since Brendan Byrne has the Democratic Party reelected a Democratic governor.
Oh wow, that's.
So
I never thought of that.
So you combine the two, they're not wives' tales; they're facts.
That's
you know,
interesting.
So I think New Jersey is capable because again, it's a moderate state,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Is capable of electing a Republican governor.
Not quite California yet.
It's not.
So we could talk all about the budget all day. And however, though, that's all we have time for. And I've found everything you guys have had to say fascinating. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that our members have too. So thank you
You're
for
welcome.
joining us.
Good to be with you.
Yep.
So remember, if you have a colleague who missed today's broadcast, we will be replaying it 3 times for CPE credit. March 16th at 9 p.m., March 17th at noon, and March 18th at noon. Our next two editions of Issues Watch Live will be recorded at the NJCPA Convention and Expo in June. If you're not attending the convention, you can register for the free replays of the sessions at the link on your screen. In the meantime, check njcpa.org, NJCPA Pulse, the Open Forum, and the Issues Watch podcast for updates on legislative matters and professional and regulatory issues. Thanks for watching.